So when Kirk asked me a few months ago to speak, normally by that time the Lord has given me something, but this time he didn't. You know how he's always trying to stretch us and grow us in different ways. So I spent a couple weeks, praying and asking the Lord, hey, what do you want me to share? So after a couple weeks went by, I thought, well, I got to start doing something. I can't just keep waiting. So I said, okay, Lord, I want to speak what you have to say, but I'm going to prepare. So I started preparing on what I like, and that was the chapter, Matthew 25, about the scripture about the bags of gold. That really means a lot to me. But as soon as I made that decision, the Lord said, no, this is what I want you to speak on. It's something how he works, right? So I don't do very well with giving titles, but I put on here, are you missing out on your blessings? And the reason I put that on there is because, just like the Apostle Paul, his testimony did a lot, right? And this one here is going to be somewhat of a testimony of mine. I think sometimes, in my opinion, that testimony on how God has done something in your life, and somebody can see how real it is to you and what the Lord has changed in you, can make an impact, right? It can give them people hope. So when I put this, are you missing out, is because the testimony here, I'm going to start with a little bit of it, but not finish it, is I was praying for the Lord to speak to me on a regular basis, not just on Sunday, not just here and there, but I wanted to hear him all day long. I wanted to be able to hear him in his direction and what he had for my life and how to minister to somebody at all times. And I thought, why can't I have it? People in the Bible had it. I see other people operating it. Why can't I? But that old saying is, when you ask for something, you may not like what you hear, right? So that it's kind of, or are you missing out on your blessings? That's where that kind of comes from. So there I was. I'm on my way to work, and I'm praying, Lord, I want to hear from you more. And he did answer. But before I get into all the details, let's go to Joshua chapter 7, 1 through 7, and it should be up here. And this is out of the NIV. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Because see, what was happening here just prior to this is they just won the battle at Jericho. But they were given instruction, all the devoted things, the gold, the silver, and all that needed to go to the Lord. Everything else was to be destroyed. But Achan, son of Camri, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them, so the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth-haven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, go up and spy out the region. So the men went up and spied out Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for there's only a few people that live there. So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gates as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. The promised land was given to them as a blessing, right? What was keeping them from attaining their blessing? they had some sin, right? Was it Joshua? No, but it was in the tribe of Israel. Now, sometimes we think that we've dealt with things, and at this time Joshua didn't know what it was. That's why he's crying out to the Lord, hey, what's going on? Sometimes things can go to where we don't realize that we have some of that in our lives, right? In this testimony here is about my story, about I had problems with my dad because he was an alcoholic. Even though he was dead when I was 14 years old, even 30 years later, I was carrying unforgiveness towards him. And because I haven't had to deal with him for so long, it was almost like it didn't exist. But yet the Lord knows where your heart is, right? He knows what's going on there. And just because I don't have to deal with it now because he's gone, it doesn't mean that I've actually dealt with it. But if you go down, I didn't bring it up here, put it up there, verse 12, it says, that is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. This is the Lord telling Joshua. They turn their back and run because they have been liable to their destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. So the Lord is wanting to deal with this sin, right? And he wants to take it all the way out to its destruction. Because if you go to verse 24 and 25, the way they resolved that is they took Achan, all of his family, his tents, all the possessions that he ever had, they stoned them and then they burned them till they were completely gone. See, the Lord wants all of us, not a part of us. He wants all of us, and He wants us to surrender those things. Sometimes we can hold on to those, right? We can almost feel like we're entitled to it. You don't understand, Lord, what they did. I have a right to, but we don't. Do we want to follow Jesus or do we want to serve ourselves? We have to surrender all those things, regardless what we think or how we feel. It's more about Jesus and what He's done for us. And I don't want to be defined by these things that I'm telling you because that's not who I am. My testimony is what Jesus has done and how He's changed me. If you go to the next slide there. So this picture seems a little distraught and we wonder how it fits in. But let's take a look at the image on the left there. And this is an image from my childhood, my memories. And it's hard to talk about, to be honest with you. But you never know who you're sitting next to and what they've gone through. And my childhood memory is, if you look at that picture, that's my dad with an axe trying to come through the door. There's beer cans on there because he's drunk. And you notice you see the mom and my sister on there. They're nervous, but I'm playing with my car because this was a normal day. The only thing that stopped him is he built this closet out of plywood and they pushed it in front of the doors, what we did, and he got tired and exhausted and went and passed out. But it got to a point where my mom thought he was going to make it in and she was about ready to put us out the window because there was no other way out. And you say, that's pretty disturbing. You're right, because see, the picture on the right is from a horror movie. It shouldn't be that way. But you have to understand, the reason I'm showing you this and the reason I'm telling you this is you got to understand why I was harboring so much unforgiveness, right? We all have our stories and what we hold on to and why we hold on to them. Does that justify it? Not at all. But sometimes we can feel that it does. I remember sitting there because my dad died because of his alcoholism. And I remember sitting in there, and it went quick. He went in one day, and 3 days later, he was dead. And I remember they called my mom and us up to the hospital, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and he comes over, and he says something to me and to my mom and my sister and say, hey, your dad's gone. He died. most people's reactions would be sorrowful, cry. But I remember I looked out the window, and this is my mental thought. I'm like, oh, I'm glad it's over. But then my next thought says, okay, George, you gotta make it look like you're sad. People just don't understand. And I don't want to explain it to them. So you got to make it look like you're sad. So I had to muster up making it look like I was sad, and I really wasn't. I was relieved. That's a hard thing, especially when you're 14 years old. Next slide. So this one here is in Isaiah 59, verses 1 through 2, and this is in a New Living Translation. Listen, the Lord's arm is not too weak to save you, nor is his ear too deaf to hear your call. It's your sin that have cut you off from God. Because of your sin, he has turned away, and you will not listen anymore. And this is where I was wanting to draw closer to God, but God is saying, we got to deal with something first, because it's cutting you off. It's not me, it's you. You got to deal with this. You got to have to forgive. And you know, I have this little thing here, the effects of sin on the human body, and it goes through the whole things, but part of it here is some of the scripture is referring to how it can blind you, how it can cause you to stumble. Those things can do that to you. And sometimes we have to kind of like self-reflect a little bit, right? To wonder, what's going on? What am I glossing over? What am I not dealing with in my life? And this happened to be one that I thought I overcome, but I didn't. But I'll explain a little bit more later. Now, if we go to John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11 in the New Living Translation, it says, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his fingers. Now, when he was doing that, what do you think that he was doing? Do you think that he was trying to come up with what he was going to say? No, he already knew. But he was in control of that whole situation. He already understood what was going on, and he wasn't answering according to my thoughts, according to how they wanted to direct it. He was just giving it a moment. Sometimes you have to let things marinate, right? They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped back down again and wrote in the dust. Now he's definitely letting it marinate now. Because he wants them to start looking back at their life. Because he's not defending himself. He doesn't need to defend himself. He's taken this opportunity where they were trying to ensnare him, to use it as a lesson to teach even the people that accused him, to speak to their hearts, as well as the person who was being accused. So when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. So this is the heart of God, right? And this is what the Lord is wanting for my life. And maybe there's somebody else here as well, might be dealing with similar things. Sins are in your life. Maybe it's unforgiveness. And the Lord is wanting you to deal with that. Because he doesn't condemn you. But sometimes we need to take that deeper look. To look deeper into our hearts to see what's going on in there. The next slide here should be Luke 6:37. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will come back against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. These are just some of the reasons I'm putting up here, on good reasons on why to forgive. It may seem harsh, but it's the truth. In the truth, sometimes we need that because it will sharpen us to understand. If we accept it and say, I see that. Because see, in that point, those people were going to judge that woman who was caught in adultery. But yet they were just as sinful as she was. But they weren't judging themselves. They were judging her and trying to use that as a trap for Jesus. So sometimes if we start looking at ourselves before we start looking at somebody else, we might see people how Jesus sees people. To be able to forgive them because we know that where we stand ourselves and what we've been forgiven of. The next slide here, Matthew 7:2 in the New Living Translation. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. So if I harbor unforgiveness towards my father, even though he's dead and gone, will my father forgive me? Those are some of the things that I had to look at in my life that I thought I dealt with. Just another reason for me to want to get this right. Even though it started in the beginning to hear more about the Lord, remember, you may not be ready for what he's going to say to you. And I was not ready for this one. This one was a bombshell that I buried, and I needed to have it resolved. But thank the Lord for doing that. On the next slide here, we have 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 2, New Living Translation. Therefore, rid yourself of all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk so that it may grow up in your salvation. So I had a lot of these, and I didn't even realize I had them at that point in time. And the reason I didn't realize I don't want to give it away here, but the reason that you can see it sometimes is because how the actions come out, right? We can say things all day long, but our actions normally show where we're at. And I could say, yeah, I forgive him. And really, a lot of actions towards my dad you couldn't see because he's dead, he's gone. But actions can come out in many different ways. In this, you could cause yourself not to become close to anybody because you're afraid that they're going to hurt you. You could not build relationships with people, not be able to have relations with people because you're afraid of that person hurting you. So I have this little saying here. It's from the Art of War. If you know your enemy and yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So when I didn't know the unforgiveness that I was holding in my heart, I didn't really know myself, did I? So how victorious could I be? And if I didn't know who my enemy was, which was the sin that I was harboring, how could I ever win? Sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to look deep. And it may It may come up because you're looking for some other, like a blessing. I have witnessed where there is somebody has a testimony where they had a healing withheld because of harboring unforgiveness. There has also been people who were asking for the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And we were praying with them, and the Lord gave me a word of knowledge that they were having some unforgiveness in their heart. And they went and dealt with it. And as soon as they did, they received the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And in this circumstance, I was withholding myself from the blessing of hearing from the Lord like I wanted to hear from him. Sometimes we just have to marinate in these things of what's going on in my life. What am I trying to bury? What am I trying to gloss over? What am I not dealing with that keeps me from God, that keeps me from Jesus, having that relationship? It's real easy because there's things that we just don't want to deal with. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but maybe I am. And I know this is kind of a hard subject here, but I really feel this is what the Lord has given me to speak on. Then 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3. If I speak in the tongues of men of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have the faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all that I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always preserves. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So there is the root of the whole thing, right? Because I needed to be like God, like Jesus, and have love. And if I'm harboring that unforgiveness, I don't have love. Because I wouldn't keep any records of wrongs, right? I didn't put these ones up here, but another one is in 1 John 4 through 8. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. Another one in John 4:16. So we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. And then Luke 6:35. But love your enemies and do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. So even my dad, as bad as he was, the Lord was kind and he loved him. And they said on his deathbed, my mom said that he did accept Jesus. But I'm going to tell you, at age 14, I really didn't care. I didn't even get saved till age 15. But now, I look forward to the day that I get to see him. Sorry. Matthew 25. I'm almost done here. 40 through 45. The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me. You are cursed into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" He will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not for one of those of the least of these, you did not do for me." And if you hold unforgiveness, are you gonna do any of these things for them? You're not, are you? You're not gonna feed them when they're hungry. And if you did, what kind of heart are you going to have? He's talking about love, and it's easy to love your friends. Try loving somebody who's your enemy. And then try loving somebody who's hurt you so much. And he's supposed to be the person who's supposed to be the one on this earth who's supposed to be there for you. It's a hard thing. But it's easy through Jesus. And I kind of want to summarize with this last slide here. We don't want to miss out on our blessings God has for us, but ultimately the driving factor to forgive and walk in love is to please the heart of God. See, I was crying out, "Lord, speak to me." And what he said to me was, when I said, "Lord, speak to me," he says, "George, do you love me?" And I said, "Yes, Lord, of course I love you." He says, "George, do you love me?" And I said, "Yes, I love you." And he said it again. And when he said it the third time, I knew what he meant. He showed me in my heart that I had this unforgiveness, and it had to be dealt with. And he showed me how it affected my life and how I wouldn't let myself get close to people. And how I kept my distance even to people who were like my wife and kids. Because I was always holding on to that unforgiveness. You know, Jesus came down to earth when he didn't have to. And he made himself vulnerable in a human body. Even though he was still strong and he didn't have to do any of that. He put himself through being crucified, mocked, ridiculed, because he loved us. And that is his heart. And if we want to be like him, that's where we need to be. We need to have that heart. And we need to have hearts that want to please God. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear my testimony about what God's done for me. It's because it's our story of Jesus, what he's done for me. And I hope his testimony about me and what he has given me to share to you today is because there's somebody else that needs help as well. I hope it encourages you, and I hope it helps you. Thanks.